as a whole. So let's start, or let's go on. We heard from the mayor of Rimini, the Prime Minister of Italy. We're in the Emilia-Romagna region, so it goes without saying that we have Stefano Bonaccini here, who is the president of the Emilia-Romagna region, and I'd like to invite him up to the podium to say hello.
Buon pomeriggio.
Well, good afternoon. I'd like to welcome our guests and distinguished guests, the authorities, Letizia in particular, for being here for this important appointment, as are all the events held here at San Patrignano, which is quite amazing for everything that happens here on a daily basis. So it's not easy to say anything relevant in 10 minutes, but I think what we're doing here is a contribution towards sustainability and responsibility, because these are the two guidelines, the food for thought that the Forum is considering and focusing on this year. It's an approach that's typical of our meeting, which is to scan the overall problem, consider the people who are involved and who may achieve the goals, and protect and safeguard our environment and our community. The Agenda 2030 of the United Nations is in fact the ideal framework for events such as these and for making decisions and putting forward proposals. And yesterday, when the Molino presented a book on the subject in Bologna, the focus was in fact on sustainability, i.e. the need to consider a longer time frame than the very short period that the institutions and politics have been looking at up till now. We're seeking consensus for tomorrow's elections rather than looking at the future for our children. I personally don't know any issue that can be solved easily overnight. This morning, the Prime Minister Conte was here, and last week, I signed an agreement to purchase a supercomputer, one of the fastest ones in the world for interpreting real data. There are only a dozen worldwide. It costs 125 million euros, and we will be setting that at the Meteorological Society that has been moved from Reading in the UK after Brexit to our region in near Bologna, and it will be an example of worldwide excellence, the likes of which hardly exist in Italy at all, and worldwide there are very few. Because the point is that I think competitiveness going forward will be based on who can process data and artificial intelligence quicker. I'm not talking about abstract concepts, I'm talking about big data and the potential for making strides in reducing road accidents, helping people acquire better health conditions, and dealing with the issues produced by pollution and global warming. So the decisions are being made now, not tomorrow. We will decide today what technologies we will have in 10 and 20 years' time and how many jobs there will be. So in 2021, there will be an investment of 122 million euros. We will be the first Italian region to have completely covered our region, 328 towns, with broadband coverage for households and optic fibres for all the factories and schools in our region. Because unless you're connected to the world, you're cut out from competing in a country like Italy, where we rank 24th out of 27th in terms of connectivity. We're one of the most highly industrialised countries worldwide, and we just can't afford that. So today, many are concerned that the digital revolution and Industry 4.0 may reduce the need for jobs. It's an interesting aspect, but if you're afraid of the future, this is disruptive. Whereas here in Emilia-Romagna, we're far more concerned with jobs that will disappear unless our companies can really take the technological leap, and we enable them to do so. So we want to do our part for these massive changes to take place locally, in the field of research and for our citizens. So we're investing 2% of our regional GDP in R&D. The national average is less than 1.4%. And that, I think, has an immediate impact on jobs and quality. Our employees in R&D, well, there are more than double in our region than elsewhere in the country. And so we're the very first region in terms of productivity, which in turn will produce more jobs and certainly enable us to deliver excellent jobs. And in the other dimension, the other situation that comes to mind when I think about sustainability is the environment. And it is crucial for a planet that we may be killing with our own hands. Take waste, for example. In terms of gathering, recycling, and self-sufficiency waste-wise, we're at the top of the list. By 2020, we will be recycling 70% of waste, and 73% of our waste will be used for other purposes. Recently, efforts have been, or there have been problems in Emilia-Romagna with handling and processing waste, and also domestic waste will be processed more effectively and more efficiently, and we're hoping that the government will come up with a regional plan for special waste, for hazardous waste, so that we truly can set up supply chains in the circular economy, which is part of the sustainability issue. If we can do all of this, then certainly we will be an advanced region, even in 20 years' time. Otherwise, we'll slip back to the tail end. So what are politicians talking about these days? They're talking about facilities, plants, rubbish plants, and landfills. We're 10 years ahead of community plans in this region, and also heat treatment plants using waste as a fuel. Again, we're ahead. So what we have in many places is garbage in the streets, incinerators run inefficiently, and situations that in many cases are comparable to the third world. So we need to talk about processing waste efficiently in the appropriate places. What about water? There are investments, even in Rimini, with purification plants that have been set up, and we're the only Italian region to have conducted the water purification processes that the EU called for. So here I have to say that I would have said to Conte, and I did say to him last week, that to come up with a moratorium, a block on investments, is certainly not a good energy plan. It is not an industrial policy. It's simply putting a clamp on things, and our emissions are said to be clean because Italy does not use nuclear energy. But investments in the energy sector are being shut down in the Ravenna area. People are being laid off and companies are shutting down. Over the years, they have made huge efforts to innovate in safeguarding the environment. In the Po Valley, I myself, a little while ago, with a few other mayors from the Veneto region, Lombardy and Piedmont, we came together and we decided to join forces and come up with a joint strategy to deal with the problem and satisfy the EU requirements, because pollution is not a geographical issue. It does not have borders. So we discussed vehicle pollution. We discussed initiatives for scrapping the higher polluting automobiles, and we're talking about, we renewed many of our regional trains, making them less polluting. Commuter trains will have air conditioning, they will have handicapped spaces and spaces for bicycles, and we've also provided free buses for 60,000 commuters who have train subscriptions. We've invested in bike tracks. We've also installed electric car charging stations all over our region. And a couple of weeks ago, we asked the government to share a common strategy, because this is a challenge that we all face. And if the Po Valley is in fact a European level region, then these steps need to be taken. And it is essential for decisions to be made on a joint basis. Otherwise, we're simply, it's a drop in the ocean. So there's the other aspect of sustainability, which is the social side. Last September, I took part in the Global Climate Forum in San Francisco, 4,000 delegates from all over the world. All the governments of the world were represented, nearly all the metropolitan regions of the world, and Lombardy and Emilia-Romagna were chosen as one of 7 European regions to steer the transition between now and 2030, such that our policies in our regions will reduce by 40% the climate-changing polluting gases in the environment. However, the third dimension that ties in with the previous two is the social side. The day before yesterday, Emilia-Romagna was presented to investors, and there was a tender for investing in our region, and I said that for the last 4 years, all of the social parties involved came together to make the strategic decisions that we had to make. So we're talking about being the #1 region for manufacturing growth, for importing and exporting, and we rank #2, only second to Baden-Württemberg, and we're in fact ahead of Bayern. So a little baby born today in Coriano or Rimini has a life expectancy of 87 years, a boy 81 years, and we think that is something quite extraordinary. Back in 1978, when the national health system was set up with universal health care, regardless of income, health became guaranteed for all citizens. Well, that also enabled us to have an excellent healthcare system. Back in 78, life expectancy was 11 years shorter. In the early 60s, it was 16 or 17 years shorter. So we know that we are competitive, we're attractive, we are a wonderful place to work and live, provided people's quality of life are the focus of what you are doing, and that is something that needs to be understood. The past crisis has left open wounds all over Italy, and here too we had 9% unemployment here, or 19% unemployment here, 3 times higher than in the same region after the war. Now it's down to 5.9%. However, we need to deal with the issues that still exist, and the institutions are in the forefront. We need antibodies to protect our health going forward, and if we can learn anything at all from our mistakes, that is what we will have to do. Dealing with poverty is another issue, and it must be tied in with employment, because the only thing that gives people dignity and gives families dignity is to have a job. And it also enables you to build foundations for your future. So if institutions and the politics think that giving people money because they don't have a job, and, well, those policies and those institutions are doing a good job. But if they simply think that they can clean their consciences by handing out money to people who are sitting home jobless, well, maybe they should ask those people to get out and go back to work somehow. So public debt as well. is not a good basis for sustainability or responsibility. And in terms of poverty, certainly Emilia-Romagna is doing better than the rest of Italy and also much of Europe, 70% here, 23% the European Union, 29% in Italy. So as I said, reducing social inequality is a lever for sustainable growth. And it is the main goal. How do you deal with poverty? Obviously, subsidies for the poor, but also through health, jobs and welfare. And we're the region that invests the most in social inclusion. We have the lowest long-term employment rate, 3% here versus 6.5% for the rest of Italy and 3.4% in the European Union. And also with regards to the job workforce, we also have a very high percentage of female workers. That is what we call responsibility. You can't support families with ideologies. You need policies, services, investments and resources. If I think of job numbers, then you can't say that they are good, excellent or not so good. Here, I think we see a danger lurking. Oftentimes, the unemployed are the younger people. And again, young people are earning less money. So this is an issue that we need to deal with now and going forward. So there's no magic spell. There's no silver bullet. We believe that the best way to drive sustainability and responsibility is to empower the young people through education, culture and training. And in addition to that, Italy is lagging behind in encouraging young people to join the job market and training them for the job market. But this is something we need to invest in. Also, with respect to the goals of Agenda 2030. Let me add, in closing, that growth is development. If it is fair, if it is equally distributed, if it involves everyone. So unequal growth, as has been in the past the case, and that may as well develop in the future, shakes our foundations and makes us less inclusive, more fearful, and angrier and more resentful. I don't think these problems can be solved by simply preaching what we think is the right message. Governments should change things when they need changing and enable people to feel involved in the change, as you have done in this magnificent experience here at San Patrignano. If goals can be shared and pursued together, then you can ask people to make sacrifices to achieve them. Otherwise, all you have is selfishness, egotism, and politics must assume its responsibility, shoulder its responsibilities, and make a contribution towards social sustainability. Thank you.